Good evening, and welcome to the Modesto Bee's Congressional District 10 debate from the State Theater in Modesto, California. I'm Brian Clark, editor of the Bee, and I'm joined by our moderators, managing editor Patty Guerra, and Modesto Bee opinions editor Garth Stapley. And now let's welcome tonight's candidates. From left to right, robotics engineer Ryan Blevins. Computer programmer Mike Barkley. Congressman Josh Harder. Veterinarian Ted Howze. Construction company owner Marla Sousa Livengood. And San Joaquin County Supervisor Bob Elliott. Here are the ground rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. They will have 1 minute to answer a direct question and 45 seconds for a rebuttal or to answer a follow-up question. Each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. Not every candidate will be able to answer every topic, but we will hear from everyone. Please keep your reactions to a minimum and be respectful of the candidates and your fellow patrons, and please remain seated. The seating order for tonight's debate was as follows. We put the 3 Democrats to your left and the 3 Republicans to your right. What else are we going to do, right? We then placed them from inside out in order of CD10 election experience and results. The questions originated from Garth Stapley and you, the audience. We do appreciate the time you took to send us more than 150 questions, some of which will be asked tonight. We want to thank our editorial board members who are helping us keep the candidates on time tonight, Modesto Bee Research and Information Specialist Maria Figueroa and visiting editor Keir Wilkinson. A couple housekeeping items. The intense interest in the debate illustrates the importance of the March 3rd primary and the general election in November. Please make sure to vote and participate in the democratic process. And whether it's the Modesto Bee or other local media outlets, remember that nobody covers local news or local elections like your local newspaper. We care greatly about your opinions and your feedback. That's why we set up a survey at modbee.com asking readers to tell us what issues they care about the most and what questions they want our reporters to ask the candidates. And that will be through the entire election season, so please participate. With that, of course, I would encourage everyone to sign up for a Modesto Bee subscription at modbee.com/subscribe. And if you're a print subscriber and have not activated your digital account, you can do so at modbee.com/activate. You can work with Karina in the lobby after the debate, or you can do that at home. Your support allows us to conduct events like this and allows us to provide coverage of Modesto, Stanislaus County, and the region. We really appreciate you being here tonight. Let's get started.
Good evening, candidates. It's now time for opening statements. From the perspective of the audience, we will go from left to right. We will reverse the order for the closing statements at the end. You will have 1 minute. Opening statements, Mr. Blevins.
I never envisioned myself as a politician but we need politicians that understand how automation will likely replace 73 million jobs by 2030. If we do nothing, we may be facing a recession worse than the last one in 2008. We need politicians that will work to prevent an economic disaster, not react to one. I am wearing a shirt that says, "Make America Think Harder," because I believe the people of California 10 should elect the candidate with the policies that benefit them most. As a proponent of universal basic income, Medicare for all, and ending the wars, I believe I am that candidate.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley?
My name is Mike Barkley. I am one of the most qualified congressional candidates in this country. I am the most qualified candidate in this race. I am a lawyer, inactive certified public accountant, and computer programmer. I own a ranch with my brother. I've been an activist in land use, water rights, flooding, and environmental issues. I am socially liberal, fiscally conservative. With law, I can read and write legislation. With accounting, I can read and write budgets and financial reports. With data processing, I can produce and evaluate data. These disciplines fit together: words, numbers, data, and are the core of the congressional obligation. I'm running to get things done that should be done that are not getting done. I will touch on some of them in my closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder?
Well, first of all, thank you so much to Modesto Bee for hosting, and thanks so much to all of you for showing up. Thank you. I think the last time I saw the State Theater this packed was when the Star Wars prequels came out a while ago. It's exciting to see so many people participating in democracy. I never thought I'd be on this stage. I never thought I'd run for office. But I did because I thought we had a record of politicians from the Valley who put special interests and partisan politics ahead of us. And most specifically, my belief is that I love this Valley. Everything I have was given to me by this community. Fifth-generation resident, grew up in Turlock. My first job was a paperboy for the Turlock Journal, went through the school system, graduated from Modesto High. Go Panthers. Some Panthers fans. But I ran because even after a career working in business, briefly teaching at Modesto Junior College, I knew we'd been left behind. My younger brother, all right, that's it. We got to fix it.
Thank you. Mr. Howze?
Good evening. I'd like to thank the Bee for having us and our audience for attending this evening also. My name is Ted Howze, and I was raised on Central Valley farms by working class parents, and I'm proud of achieving the American dream by putting myself through college and veterinary school, working as a firefighter and EMT. For the last 25 years, I've served our local Valley dairy farmers as a large animal veterinarian, and I'm thrilled to have the overwhelming support of our Stanislaus County farmers. I've also served my community of Turlock as a planning commissioner and city council member. I'm running for Congress after personally struggling with the failure of our healthcare system and living the tragic reality of suddenly becoming a single parent, fighting to work and raise my 3 children. My top 3 priorities as your member of Congress: making quality health care affordable for all Americans, reducing the cost of living for Valley families, and securing America's borders.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood?
Good evening. I'm Marla Sousa Livengood. I grew up working on my family's farm, and at that time I never imagined that I would be involved in politics. In fact, I didn't know what policy even was. I did an ag internship in college, and that's where I realized that policy impacts our everyday lives, everything that we do. Wanting to learn more, I went back to Washington, D.C., and I ultimately served as legislative director on the House of Representatives. I served in roles focusing on agriculture, transportation, economic development, and job creation. I'm proud of my Deep Valley roots and the work I've done to support our valley. As part of the ag industry, I fought to ensure that farmers are not forgotten in Sacramento or in DC. As a member of the San Joaquin County Aviation Advisory Committee, I've worked to bring air cargo to our region as well as passenger service. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of 3, and I know how hard it is for families to make ends meet. As a small business owner, I've experienced the burden of job-killing regulations, and I would be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Good evening. I'm Bob Elliott. I grew up on a farm in Kansas, earned an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, graduated in the top 5% of my class, later earned a master's degree in national security affairs, and was proud to serve my country for 30 years in the United States Army. I retired as a colonel, U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, and I have never forgotten the values embodied by the West Point motto, the values of duty, honor, country. I've served as a San Joaquin County Supervisor for the past 7 years, and have worked hard to accomplish things that will make people's lives better. In Congress, I'll support securing our borders, protecting Central Valley water rights for our agriculture-based economy, keeping our neighborhoods safe and our nation's military strong, and I'll oppose fiscal waste and efforts to increase our taxes. My mission is to deliver common sense and responsibility in government. More than any other candidate in this race, I have the background and experience necessary to effectively represent the people of 10th District.
Thank you. For our first question, we'll direct it to the incumbent. Mr. Harder, please explain your vote on the impeachment of President Trump.
Yeah.
Please. Let's hear his answer.
Look, I ran for Congress so we could lower the cost of health care, secure water for the valley, and make sure that everyone in this valley has a chance for a good, prosperous life. That said, I also swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States. And when I saw, you guys are taking up my time. When I saw clear evidence that we had a president that put his own personal political interests ahead of our national security by asking a foreign leader for help in an election, I thought that violated the Constitution. And if a Democratic president did the same thing, I also would have put my country ahead of my political party. That said, I have supported 85% of the bills that I have supported have been with a Republican. I have supported more bills with Republicans than any other Democrat in the country, and I am happy to work with anybody, regardless of party, to get stuff done that we need to do in the Valley.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the audience to be just a little bit more respectful. We want to give these candidates enough time to answer their questions, and if we have too many outbursts, they're not going to have that time that they need. So please, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but show some respect. We want to hear from each of the other candidates on this very question. So from your left, we'll start with Mr. Howze, and we'll just go in order, and we'll ask you for your views on the impeachment of President Trump. Mr. Howze.
Well, I think obviously impeachment has been politically motivated since the moment the president took office. It's resulted in a Congress that's been ineffective at getting anything done. We've talked about a lot of bills that have been passed, but they've gone nowhere because everybody's tied up with this. It also makes it very easy to support impeachment when you take $28,000 from Adam Schiff for doing it. $28,000 from Adam Schiff's PAC for supporting the impeachment of the president when you ran on taking no party boss money. So I think everybody sees right through it. The American people are going to get to vote on how they feel. And I think with the lowest unemployment rates, lowest black unemployment rates, lowest Hispanic employment rates, highest raise in wages in this country and forever, I think the American people are going to look very favorably upon the Republican Party in 2020.
Thank you. Audience, please. Ms. Livengood.
Families in this district are struggling, and impeachment gets us no place better to being out of struggling. We are not any better off. All that impeachment does is eat up the time of Congress for political show and political gain, and meanwhile, we are left here hurting. It's time that Congress gets to work. It's time that they do health care reform. It's time that they fix our water issues, and it's time that they do immigration reform. Impeachment, all it does is put those issues off and put them on the back burner while we struggle here in the Valley. It's absolutely absurd.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Impeachment from the very beginning has been a political initiative. Josh Harder has flip-flopped on the issue. Initially, he was opposed, and then when Nancy Pelosi asked him or ordered him to fall in line, that's what he did. Those who are pushing impeachment are wasting their time and our money and trying to overturn an election because they didn't like the outcome, and frankly, I think they're worried that President Trump will win again. But let's face it, we've got an election coming up in less than a year. Let's let the people decide who the president will be, rather than a bunch of politicians in Washington.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Blevins.
It's 2020. It's an election year. Let's let the people decide if they want to keep Trump in office or not. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
Can I hear a big boo now and get it out of your system? If we were to impeach President Trump of all the offenses that he has committed against the Constitution, we would be, we would be impeaching him every day. He does not care. He does not care about me. He does not care about you, even though you were yelling for him. He does not care about anybody but President Trump. He should be impeached for the treason that he committed in Helsinki. He should be impeached for the trade-off of his Twin Towers in Istanbul and for the Kurds, for the lives of the Kurdish minority. He should be impeached for betrayal of us to the North Koreans. He should be impeached for an infinite list of things, for 16,000 lies that he has told since he's been in office. He does not care about you. You just haven't been fired yet, so you don't know yet.
Thank you. Audience, please. Please let us continue. Mr. Harder, you were mentioned in that. Do you have a rebuttal?
I think it's pretty ironic that I'm attacked for flip-flopping on this issue and also for wanting to do it from day one. Both of those things can't be true. The fact is, I changed my position when the facts changed. And when I swore an oath to the Constitution, that's the obligation that I took. That said, you don't see me on cable TV yelling about it every day. My job is to make sure that I'm delivering for the Valley. And the same day that the impeachment vote happened, I brought a taxidermied swamp rat to the floor of Congress to make sure that people understood about the threat that invasive species play to our farmers, eating up our water levees and the like. Because of that, we have Republican and Democratic support to make sure that we are cleaning up the swamp in D.C. just as much as we're cleaning up the swamp in California.
Thank you.
Thank you. This next question comes to us from students at CSU Stanislaus, and this is to all the candidates. Stanislaus State and Modesto Junior College have significant numbers of Dreamer students whose residency is protected by DACA, or Deferred Action for Children Arrivals. How would you support these students? Please explain your views on DACA. We'll start with you, Mr. Howze.
I've been very clear because I'm on video that's been posted everywhere from 2018 where I've said, listen, I think that the individuals in our country, Dreamers who signed up under the provisions of DACA, should be protected. They did the right thing when the government asked them to do it. We should freeze their protection in place. They shouldn't have to fill out additional applications to renew, and they should have the ability to enter the line to earn citizenship in this country. I'm a coach. I believe by playing by the rules. They did the right thing, and we need to stand behind them and protect the Dreamers that did the right thing also.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Livengood?
This is an issue that's been drawn on for way too long. You know, back in the 80s, we had immigration reform, and unfortunately, the visas and the reforms that were done at that time weren't enough. They didn't solve the problem. We need to fix the problem for everybody that's here. We need to provide visas so that they can be here legally, they can work, they can go to school, they can do the things that they need to do, because you know what? Dreamers are part of our community. They're our friends, they're our neighbors. But in addition, we need to secure the border. We can't just keep redoing amnesties and bringing these issues back up. I've worked very hard on guest worker legislation in agriculture, and as you may or may not know, there are a large number, in fact, almost all workers in agriculture do not have proper visas to be here. And they're working, they're living in the shadows. We all know it. The government knows it, our elected officials know it, yet what have we done to actually come to a solution? We've played with the same building blocks for the last 20 years in Congress, and nobody has had the courage to make a decision and to move forward. We need to secure our borders now, and we need to provide visas for those that are living and working in our communities.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott?
I certainly sympathize and empathize with those young people who were brought here illegally by their parents. So although they are here illegally, they came through no fault of their own. So I think that we really need to make some accommodations for people that are in that situation. If they are trying to be good citizens and want to become citizens, we should make some accommodations for that. Now, the ultimate solution to this problem, however, is to secure our borders, to get control of who is coming across so that we know who's coming into the country and under what conditions they're coming. Until we do that, we will continue to wrestle with this problem on a periodic basis. I would like to also point out one other thing here. In terms of the DACA issue, President Trump, some time ago, offered to make a deal with the Democrats in Congress. He offered to solve the DACA problem if they would give him the money he requested for the wall. They refused.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins?
Legal immigration is limited to 42,000 people per country. If we increase that value, it will solve many of the issues we face. We need to secure a pathway for citizenship for people that want to come here.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley?
Reinstate DACA, stop tormenting those kids, let them be part of our society, make a path to citizenship for them. 8 years ago, I received a survey from the AFL-CIO, and I thought that their position on immigration was pretty good, so I put it on my website. And then along came Bernie in 2016, and he had a great and wonderfully fair policy. But this year, he has updated that. It's a welcoming and safe America for all, which is what he puts on there. We need to recognize the difference between immigrants and refugees, start treating refugees with the respect that they deserve, and allowing them into our country, and stop tormenting these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder?
Look, the Valley is the land of immigrants. That is the economic and social fabric of the way we live. And I think everybody at this stage agrees that for a long time, we have had political leaders of both parties that have put their own partisan interests ahead of building a humane immigration system that, yes, also keeps our communities safe. That's what we want to do. And it has huge personal impacts. When I was teaching at Modesto Junior College, I met a young woman who was working 2 part-time jobs, wanted to grow up, be a pharmacist, live the American dream, but she was carried over the border when she was 3 months old. Because of that, she doesn't know what her future's going to hold. That's the story for 10,000 kids, just like that, just right here in the Valley. And that's why I voted for the DREAM Act. You guys are talking like we didn't do much. We passed it out of the House. That's a huge deal. And if you really think that we should have political leaders that put the interest of those kids ahead of partisan politics, then we should all ask the U.S. Senate to put that to a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder, this question is just for you. What do you think about Mr. Howze calling you, quote, an ultra-left incumbent who has been schmoozing the San Francisco Champagne and Brie crowd?
Wow.
And end quote. Also, Are you, as Mr. Howze says, Nancy Pelosi's top lieutenant? Mr. Harder.
Wow. I haven't heard that. Look, judge me by my record. One of my most vivid recollections of my first week in office, walking outside this hotel, 8 a.m. Monday morning, my first impression of life in D.C., with all these other members of Congress behind me. There's two big buses standing there. And I asked the security guard, I'm like, which bus should I take? He says, well, there's the Republican bus and the Democratic bus. And that's the way a lot of Washington works. But that's not how the Valley works. And so because of that, I have tried to not just be the Democratic member of Congress or the Republican member of Congress, but to listen to every community member that we have. I've done 18 town halls across the Valley, and like I said, I have sponsored more bills with Republicans than any other Democrat in the country. So if you care about what I'm valuing, look at and judge me by the record that I've built.
Thank you. Mr. Howze, your name was mentioned in the question. Would you care to?
Absolutely. Listen, Josh and I went to 6 or 7 events 2 years ago together, and I listened to him quite a bit. And he made the case at those events that you are who you take money from. And his money, 90% of it comes from out of this district and most of it from the Bay Area. His supporters get bussed in to work for him on weekends, and you vote with Nancy Pelosi 96% of the time. There could be no two different districts than San Francisco and the Central Valley of California. So you can't tell me that you're not beholden to San Francisco interests and the Bay Area crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look, judge me by what we've actually done. I think I heard a lot of finger pointing in there. I think that's exactly what people hate about politicians, is folks that actually finger point and don't actually create solutions. Look at the examples that we've made. My grandpa serves 2 tours in Vietnam, was affected by Agent Orange. I heard from a lot of veterans in our community that have been left behind for the last 50 years. So I worked with Republicans and Democrats to take a bill that had been on the back burner of Congress for 50 years to pass that through the House, through the Senate. President Trump signed that into law. Now every Vietnam veteran affected by Agent Orange has their medical disabilities covered. That's a big deal. We did that by working together and getting it done.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question comes from our audience, and it's to all the candidates. What can you do in Washington to address homelessness in the Valley? And we'll start with Ms. Livengood.
It's extremely unfortunate that we are living in a world where we have such high levels of homelessness. We see it everywhere we go. And one thing that we have to recognize is that why are people homeless? There's some that have mental illness, there's some that have drug addiction, and there's some that may be down on their luck. The federal government, typically when they do a program, unfortunately, they put all these strings. I've talked to folks at the Housing Authority, and when the strings that are put on your funding and your mechanisms often prevent those things that work from actually working. At the Modesto Gospel Mission, they have a religious-based program. It works. But unfortunately, they can't take federal dollars because of the restrictions on religious-based advocacy and programs. And so what I would do is I would take those restrictions off. We need a mix of things that work, and we need to make sure that our folks at home, we're not just throwing money after bad. We have to have markers, and we have to have expectations that goals are met, not just writing a blank check.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott?
Thank you. The homelessness problem is multifaceted. We will not solve the homeless problem until we solve the underlying causes. So we have to accept the fact that a one-size-fits-all approach will not work for homeless. There are many reasons, as were just laid out, why people become homeless. Some have run into a spell of unfortunate circumstances that make it impossible for them to pay rent or their mortgage. Others have substance or mental health issues or both, which prevent them from actually performing as an effective member of society. And then there is the criminal element that just lives among the homeless and preys upon them. So we need to have a multi-pronged approach, a a complete approach that addresses all of those issues in order to solve that problem. Just throwing money at it will not work. We have to add accountability into the mix. That has to be part of the equation that is missing right now. But until we solve all the problems, the underlying problems, we won't solve homelessness.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins.
When I think about the homeless crisis, I think of Los Angeles' attempted solution. What Los Angeles tried to do is they set aside $3 billion to build houses for homeless people. They built 22 houses, which was not enough. Another thing that I think of are two candidates that I have met on the campaign trail. One of them is currently homeless and he's living in his car. And the other candidate was homeless like 10 years ago. They both work full-time, but they can't afford a house. So we are working together on this bipartisan thing called the Universal Basic Income Caucus. And what that would do is that would give money to every person in the United States. And if we do this right, homeless people will have enough money to rent houses.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
The Salt Lake City system works. The Houston system works. At least the Salt Lake City system worked until they cut the funding on it and it stopped working. At the federal level, we need to adopt either or both of those systems and fund them and not scrimp on the money and make it bipartisan and get it through the Senate to get these people the money that they need in order to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
Homelessness is an emergency. I remember driving to school every day in Modesto 20 years ago. I would barely see a homeless person over the bridge. Now, they're everywhere. It's skyrocketed. And unfortunately, I think we've seen politicians in both Sacramento and Washington who are more interested in pointing fingers and getting engaged in Twitter feuds than actually working together to come to a solution. So I introduced a bill to allow for a federal emergency on homelessness. Think about what happens after the wildfires that we've tragically seen across California. Every time there's one of those fires, somebody loses a home, the federal government gets in, supports those folks to get back on their feet. We should be doing the same thing for the hundreds of thousands of folks that are living on our streets every single day and ensure that they get the support services for mental health and substance abuse and also the affordable housing resources to allow those folks to get back on their feet as well.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
Listen, the approach that's being taken towards homelessness is failing. It's failing because it's like trying to throw $100 bills on a bonfire to put the fire out. We are not solving the core issues. The core issues are drug addiction, alcohol addiction, mental illness. But we will not change behavior towards a group of people that are living a life of criminal vagrancy if there's no consequences to their actions. Not only are we not putting consequences, we're building places for people to go shoot up with heroin in clean facilities. That's got to stop. The first step to curing homelessness is re-empowering our law enforcement and district attorneys to enforcing quality of life laws and then giving individuals an opportunity to enter diversionary programs. When they come out, we should be investing in those people who have gone to treatment, who want to come out and learn skills, get job skills. We should invest the money, but we cannot do anything till the homeless are willing to take the first step themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, for this question, we're going to ask for short answers, meaning 30 seconds. We'll start with Mr. Elliott. Do you live in the 10th Congressional District, and how important is it that one live in the district that one seeks to represent in the House of Representatives? Mr. Elliott.
Yes. And I think it's important that
Yes, you do live in the 10th?
Yes, I do live in the 10th District. The 10th District includes about the southern one-third of San Joaquin County, which is Tracy, Manteca, Escalon, and Ripon. It is very important that a representative live in the district he represents, because that is the most effective way to be in tune with the issues and those things that are most important to the people that he is charged with representing. So if you're not living there, you're really at a disadvantage and not doing
you.
what you should be doing for your constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Blevins.
I am from Oakdale, California, which is in the 10th District, but there were no jobs here, and it forced me to leave, and I want to come back, but I can't because there's no jobs here. So something that I will try to do is bring the jobs back to the Valley so that our people are not forced to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Barkley.
I live in the 10th. The Constitution allows any citizen in the state to run to represent any congressional district in the state, so the Constitution allows it. I think it's more important than living in the district that whoever runs, whether they're in or out, that they make daily efforts to communicate with the people in and to listen to the people in the district and to make tours and do everything else like that. If you live in the district and just sit in your house and don't do anything, that's no better than living out of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. I neglected to mention that this is a question from the audience. Mr. Harder, your answer.
Absolutely. Family's been here 5 generations, live in Turlock, but I agree with Mike. It's not just about living here, it's about listening to the interests of our community, which is why in my first year in office, I did 18 town halls, more than any member in Central Valley history. Any of you are welcome anytime. Come, ask me questions, share your concerns. Let me know how I can be out there working for you.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
Yes, I live, work, and am registered to vote in the city of Turlock. And I think more important than just listening, because we all listen, you can listen and still not service your customers. That's why so many people in the 10th District are calling our campaign in our office asking for help because they've been unable to receive it at your office. Take the case of the 100-year-old Sam Satariano, who showed up at your office asking your staff to help him get treatment at the VA system and couldn't do it. We did. We got him treatment through a local doctor. That's what happens when you live here and you're local and you have known people for 2.5 decades. If you can't get it done through the government route, you know enough people to get it done privately.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
So all of us throughout the Valley, it doesn't matter where your geographical lines are. You know, Josh came from the Bay Area, Ted came from Stockton recently, and wherever those geographical lines, in San Joaquin County, we are gerrymandered and we are split in half. Part of our county, the part that I live in right over the line, goes all the way into the Bay Area. I'm an ag girl. I have a lifetime of ag policy experience, and I know that Valley farmers, like my family, we're hurting, and so are families, and I'm here to support those families and to use the skills that God's blessed me with to represent us in Congress.
Thank you. It's my duty to ask you to answer the first question, Ms. Livengood. Do you live within the 10th?
No, I live right outside the line.
Thank you.
Claire to comment about our casework. You mind if I respond to that?
Please do.
Look, that's a lie. If you're saying that we don't actually help veterans in our office, that is a blatant lie. When I entered office, I wrote a letter to every single veteran in our district offering to help. We've helped over 300, don't ask me, ask people like Peter Claffey and Tracy, somebody who had been getting the runaround from the VA, which wasn't providing him diabetes medication since 2013 for 6 years. He called me, we got it done, now he has his medication. We've helped over 300 people just like that, and we're open and ready for business. Anybody in this audience needs a help, Medicare, Social Security, harder.house.gov.
Thank you. Mr. Howze, your name was mentioned also. Do you care to respond?
Listen, I take exception to being called a liar. Take another case of where David Calvin Lewis's family, when the American flag showed up, that was his burial flag, and your office told him you couldn't help, and we ended up having the flag come through us through another source, and within 2 weeks we found the family of that flag. If you'd like to join me tomorrow morning for coffee in Turlock at 9 a.m., we're meeting with another veteran who says your office won't help him. We're more than happy to have you come and meet them and see if you can give them the help they need.
Thank you. This next question is for Mr. Howze. Mr. Harder's campaign has called you, quote, a Trump loyalist, and described you as someone who, quote, has aligned himself 100% with President Trump, unquote. Mr. Harder also said, quote, Ted Howze is going to be a rubber stamp for Trump's agenda. How do you respond?
Well, first of all, I'm a rubber stamp for nobody. I'm opinionated, I have my own. The president and I, stylistically, are two different people. I mean, he is loud New York, New Jersey, and I am much more laid back California. So, listen, I'm not running to support or just oppose a president of the United States. I'm running to actually get things done for my district. And when the policies are good, I'll support them. And when the policies are bad, I won't. It's that simple. I was on record during the 2018 campaign on video of things I disagreed with the president. The B staff knows this. So I'm nobody's rubber stamp.
Thank you. Mr. Harder, since the question referenced you, do you have a comment?
Sorry. I didn't hear
Since
that.
you were referenced in the question, do you have a comment?
Look, I think at the end of the day, a representative from the Valley can't just be a straight line Republican vote or a straight line Democratic vote. I think you have to represent the entirety of this district. That's what I've tried to do. And that's the record that we've built. If you look at some of the progress that we've made, we got the first federal funding for a water storage project in the Valley for over 50 years. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
We didn't get it by working with one side or the other. We did it by working with every single member of the California 10th Congressional District. I'm proud to do it, and I think anybody who has this job should be doing the same.
One of the things I talked about earlier was to keep your reactions to a minimum. We're about a half an hour in, and we've got only 5 questions through. We have a lot more questions, both from our moderators and from the audience. You can cheer for your candidate after the debate. Please do not cheer. Let the candidates answer the questions freely, and that way we'll get more through more issues, and you'll make a more informed decision on March 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. This question is for all candidates. We'd like to know your views on prescription drug prices, the Affordable Care Act, and Medicare for All. Choose one of those as you only have 1 minute, or you can cover all 3 of them if you want. We'll start with Mr. Blevins.
The United States pays more than every other country in the world for health care, and we are not even close to the top in rankings. So I think we should implement a Medicare for All program, which would cut down costs by at least $2 trillion by the most conservative estimates from the Koch brothers. And I have even seen estimates as high as $17 trillion over a 10-year period. That is some serious savings, and that will help us and the rest of our country a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
I have a complex answer. I'm seeing 4 different kinds of proposals out there. The first one is an enhanced Affordable Care Act to reverse some of the stuff that the Trump administration and the previous Republican Congress has done to the ACA. The second is Medicare for All. This is actual Medicare for All, which would just be changing the date on eligibility to 0 from what it is now. You would still need supplemental insurance for that. The third is what they're calling Medicare for All, which is actually a fully enhanced Medicare, eliminating all of the costs that the supplemental would take care of. The fourth one is a single payer plan like they have in Taiwan. You get a card, you go in, you get your stuff done, no charge. I would vote for any of those 4 that came before me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
Look, everybody deserves access to health care. Everybody deserves a chance to go out and see a doctor and be able to afford those prescriptions. And in the Valley, the cost of health care is way too high. I met a woman from Modesto named Michelle the other day. She's a 7-year-old daughter with type 1 diabetes. They have the best insurance you can imagine, and they still pay $5,000 every year out of their own pockets for that insulin and those test scripts. When their daughter turns 18, they will have spent nearly $100,000 just to keep their daughter alive. That's money that could have been spent on a mortgage or car payments or college. That's a big deal. And that's why last year I voted for H.R. 3, which would lower prescription drug costs by forcing Medicare to negotiate directly with these drug companies. On average, it would cut drug prices by 75%. Think about what that would mean to everybody paying a prescription drug around here. That passed the House, but it has been held up in the Senate because we have members of the Senate who are more interested in what the prescription drug lobby cares about than people like Michelle and her daughter.
Thank you, Mr. Howze.
Look, I have personal experience with the failure of the healthcare system in this country. And I'm telling you right now, Medicare for all is not the answer. It is not the answer, because when somebody is inserted between a patient and a doctor and making the decisions for them, you're in the same position my late wife was in. Under Medicare for all, there's only two ways to control cost, and that is either to pay doctors less for providing services or provide fewer services. And if you don't think that's true, go look at the VA system right now. We're talking about the number of veterans we've been helping through the VA system. It's a joke. Nobody deserves to have that kind of medical care. I propose we fix private health care systems. I will support any plan that covers pre-existing conditions, that increases transparency and competition to drive costs down, and removes any roadblock between patients and their doctors. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
I can tell you what the Affordable Care Act meant for my family. For my family, we now have a health insurance premium that costs more than our mortgage. Our access to care has declined. Our cost for prescriptions has increased. We have been devastated by the socialization of our healthcare system, and doubling down on it with Medicare for all is the wrong direction for Americans, and it's the wrong direction for my family. You know, when I look at safety nets, Medicare for all was meant to be a safety net. The more we water that down, the more we disconnect the consumer, the patient, from the actual provider, the worse care that we get. And Ted's right, the VA system, look at the debacle over there. Look at the veterans that have been waiting. These are our treasures. These are men that fought for our country, and they have been left without the proper care that they need because the government has taken control of the system. The government needs to get out of our health care, and we need to put consumers back with doctors and go back to the good old days and get the government out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. Our healthcare is a system that needs many corrections. We need to make it more available to people. We need to make it more affordable to people, and we need to make sure that pre-existing conditions are covered. Now, the Medicare for All plan is a massive government takeover of our healthcare system. It is going to cause higher prices. It is going to reduce the availability of services for our people who need it. And it is going to reduce the number of doctors who actually, it is likely to reduce the number of doctors who are actually in the system. And as the doctors become fewer, then healthcare becomes rationed. This is what happens when you have a socialistic takeover of a massive part of our economy.
Thank you.
So what we need is the Affordable Care Act, the Medicare for All, cannot work because it is a $32 trillion program over 10 years. We can't afford that. We'll have less individual freedom and more government control.
Thank you.
Can I
This
respond?
next question is to Mr. Barkley, Ms. Livengood, and Mr. Elliott. Your bases of support appear to be in San Joaquin County where you live. What are you doing to reach out to people in Stanislaus County where most of the district voters reside? We will start with Mr. Barkley.
Over the last 8 years, I have knocked on the doors of more than 160,000 registered Democrats, Independents, Green, and Peace and Freedom. I have walked every urban, public, residential street in both counties in the district. I have missed 5 streets, 3 of them because the homeowners association is doing something illegal to keep canvassers out. You can't get better contact than knocking on their door and listening to them.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
So I've spent a lifetime representing farmers and transportation interests and working with them throughout the Central Valley, not just San Joaquin County. My dad's probably marked almost every orchard in Stanislaus County. My family's been here. I have deep roots. We've opened an office in Modesto. I'm out walking every day now. We're meeting people, we're doing meet and greets, and we're doing what we need to do to expand our base. I have a great deal of relatives with the Sousa last name in Stanislaus County, and I'm using them as a network to help me fan out and meet those that I haven't met yet. But we're doing what we need to do to reach out to Stanislaus County voters, and if I have not had the opportunity to meet you yet, please introduce yourself. I'd love to get together with you and reach out to us at our office. We're there every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. Of course, I am much better known in San Joaquin County as a county supervisor than I am in Stanislaus County. However, that very connection with the county government in San Joaquin County is also a connection throughout the state. I represent our county board of supervisors on the California State Association of Counties and have also been involved with various types of organizations that are regional, that are multi-county in nature, such as the Regional Association of California Counties, which is oriented primarily in the Central Valley. So through those associations, I keep myself informed and involved in the issues that are important throughout the valley, not just in San Joaquin County. Also, on a more personal basis, I have made a special effort to reach out to various groups, various organizations, various businesses and individuals in Stanislaus County to engage them in terms of what their issues are and what needs to be done to provide the best results for the people who will be throughout the district, not just in San Joaquin County.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question comes from the audience, and it is for all candidates. Is it important that we provide more water storage for our farmers? And specifically, what do you think about the proposed reservoir in Del Puerto Canyon just outside of Partisan? We'll start with Mr. Barkley.
On my website is a plan to add 44 million acre feet of storage in Northern California and Central California. And the reason we need that is because when there is a repeat of the floods of 1861-62, which was the least of 7 such floods over the last 1,800 years, the result will be a 300-mile-long lake in the Central Valley like there was last time, and we will have to evacuate. That's all of us. We will have to evacuate 1.5 million of us who have moved into that footprint. So I advocate more storage. As to whether or not that specific storage would be included, I would like to listen to all sides before deciding.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
Absolutely. Look, agriculture is the heart and soul of the valley. 1 out of every 3 jobs comes directly or indirectly from agriculture. It's why my great-great-grandfather started a peach farm here out of every place in the world to do it, because we have the best soil and the best water. And if we're going to ensure that we pass that legacy on to the next generation, we're going to need more water storage somewhere. But we haven't been making any progress. It's been 50 years since we got the last federal funding for a water storage project. Until this year, when my office worked with Republicans and Democrats alike to make sure that we got $14 million of funding for an array of projects, including for an impact report on whether or not Del Puerto Canyon is going to be a good reservoir location. That's progress. The first federal funding in over 50 years. There is so much more room to grow. There is so much more opportunity. But if we think that we need storage somewhere, then this is the opportunity to have that conversation. I've been so excited. I've met with proponents, opponents. Even over the last day, I've met with a lot of folks about this project. It's a top priority, and we got to make sure we're moving it forward.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
I settled in this valley because I work in agriculture every single day. That's what I do as a dairy veterinarian. We not only milk cows, but we grow crops. We have to have water. I think the Del Puerto project is first of all, it's a private project. And I think it faces some hurdles because of the environmental impact reports. I think once they get through that, if they can prove they can stand up and the community of Partisan is safe below them, that it's a great project. Listen, the biggest reason that we don't build any new reservoirs in California is because the Democratic Party is beholden to the environmentalist lobby. We could build the best water storage in the world up in these canyons and could build a hydroelectric dam on every single one. We could provide water and power to fuel our economy. but Democrats in the state of California won't even declare hydroelectric energy renewable energy. The biggest impediment that we face in California is the Democratic Party.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood?
We absolutely have to increase our water storage. We have several existing dams that could be raised. We should be doing that now. No more studies, no more research, raise the dams. We get caught up with these environmental different reports that need to be done and biological opinions, and they are weaponized by the far extreme left to prevent us from actually making any progress on the water that we need. We also have water that's flowing out to the ocean. And who gets blamed but farmers over and over again? Farmers are told that you need to water less, use micro sprinklers. Then they find out that there's subsidence because they used micro sprinklers. And we're constantly taking them through these experiments in water conservation, and we're not allowing our groundwater basins to recharge, and we're not storing the water that we need when we have it. We absolutely have to build the storage now, and we have to put a stop to these weaponized environmental processes that have prevented our water from being used responsibly, being saved, and have just allowed it to flow out to the Delta. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott?
Thank you. To solve our water problems here in California, we need to engage with a portfolio of options. For too long, we've been saddled with one form or another of a canal or a tunnel or a twin tunnel, and none of those options have really provided something that will solve the problems of lack of water in California when we have insufficient rainfall. So what we need is a portfolio of options, and storage has to be the main one. I mean, that just makes common sense. If you want to have more water when you have insufficient rainfall, then you need to store the water when you have more than you need, or when you have at least a normal year of water. We have so much water that is going out to sea every year, approximately 48 million acre feet per year, travels out to the ocean without being stored. So storage is absolutely essential. This project is one of many that I think could be a viable storage project. Shasta, Temperance Flats, others are likely candidates as well.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins?
Water storage is going to be a necessity for our future, but reservoirs have had a history of unintended consequences. Up to 30% of our water is lost through leaking infrastructure. So if we can patch those leaks, then maybe we do not need this reservoir.
Thank you. This next question is to all the candidates, and it's a 30-second question. Is climate change real, and what should be done about this issue? We'll start with Mr. Harder.
Sorry, start with me.
Is climate change real, and what should be done about it?
Yes, it's 2020. I can't believe we're debating this. It's real. It's affecting the Central Valley every single day. We're talking about water storage because we're having warmer winters, smaller snowpacks, and less water. That's one of the reasons we need some of the water storage projects that my office has fought for. We have so much more room to go, but what I'd say is this is not a problem affecting the Arctic polar bears somewhere else. This is affecting the Central Valley and an area where we live off the land every day. The first step is we've got to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
Look, our climate's been changing for the last 20,000 years. Now that does not mean that good stewardship of our planet is not good for all of us. I think that's absolutely the case. But for one, I will not stand behind radical ideas that destroy our economy, and rejoining the Paris Climate Accord only equals us paying for other countries who will do nothing to clean up their own environment.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
You know, you could pull out a farmer's almanac, you could look at the Bible for references, but the climate has been changing. The way we address this, we've had an attack on those that have been stewards of the land. You know, when you're a farmer and you farm land, you're not going to do a thing that's going to harm it. You're there to protect that land so that you can pass it on to future generations. And we keep using climate change as a way of stopping progress. Over and over again, it's climate change, or to allow other foreign nations to dictate to us how we should be doing things and what's best for our land. We need to get back to the basics, and we need to focus on what we actually need to do, not what other countries tell us to do.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. I think we can all agree that climate change occurs. It has been changing for millennium. However, the debate is over what's causing it. And that's where we need to be careful. There is a considerable disagreement in terms of whether mankind is the sole cause of all of these things, or whether there are other causes that may contribute as much or even more. So we need to keep those things all in mind.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins.
Climate change is a serious threat to the valley, as $1 billion every year of our revenue comes from almonds, where each almond takes 1 gallon of water to grow. So we need to take radical measures, and I strongly support nuclear as one of those options. Nuclear is safe, and it is the most efficient energy power source that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
Climate change is real. Every year we hear reports about the melting ice caps, and they're far worse than what they had predicted for each year. When the ice caps melt, where we are sitting will be 180 feet below sea level. If we're going to continue doing this nonsense, we need a dam at the Carquinez or the Golden Gate, or both, with massive pumps to pump the water out when we have too much. But the way things are going, the entirety of the agriculture in District 10 will be gone in another century.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Howze only. You've been running for this seat from day one as a Republican candidate. Why did Republican Party leaders recruit Mr. Elliott for this race?
The answer is they didn't. They didn't. Now, we all know in campaigns a lot of people say a lot of things to try to get traction. We've had conversations at every level with the Republican Party, from Washington, D.C. to the state of California. They assure us nobody recruited him. So, you know, we've tried not to make a big deal about it. We just stay in our own lane and we run, and we'll do our own thing. So,
thank you. Mr. Elliott, your response?
Use of the word recruited may cause a little bit of uncertainty here. I will say that I was encouraged to run by members of the National Republican Congressional Committee. So if you want to consider that recruiting, you could in a way. They have told me that they will not endorse anyone until after the primary, so we will see what happens after the primary in terms of that. But in terms of someone coming out from the NRCC and encouraging me to run, yes, that did happen.
Very good. This question goes to Mr. Blevins and Mr. Barkley. Why are you running against Josh Harder? Is not your candidacy likely to siphon Democratic votes away from this incumbent? Mr. Blevins.
Josh Harder voted to increase our military budget by $53 billion annually. And I don't think you want to be paying more for our military. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley?
There were certain irregularities in the campaign financing for the 2018 Congressional District election. And I thought that as long as those were out there and the FBI could pounce at any minute and haul off our good friend Mr. Harder, we should have another Democrat in the race.
Thank you. Mr. Harder, do you care to respond?
Look, I don't know what sort of conspiracy theories are going on the internet. I certainly haven't seen that. But look, Mr. Blevins is right. I did vote to support our military. We're in 2 wars. And I think we should end those wars. Let's be clear. I think we have soldiers and troops in harm's way in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I think we should be ending these wars in the Middle East. But that said, if I have a budget in front of me that's going to support our troops that are in harm's way, I'm going to vote yes, like I did, and I don't regret it for a minute.
Thank you. This next question is for Mr. Elliott. Previously, you were a candidate for the California Senate. Why did you switch to this congressional race?
The first reason is that Jeff Denham lost in his campaign for re-election as Congress. It is true that before that election, I was running for state Senate. I had declared and was proceeding down that path. But when he lost, I looked at the situation. When you get new information, you have to reassess where you are. I looked at that situation and I determined that the place where I could be most effective in representing the people of 10th District was in Congress. I think the people of the district need an experienced representative who is familiar with the issues that are important to them, who will answer to the people who live here, not to some Bay Area millionaire or some party leader in Washington, D.C. I can provide that type of leadership. That's where I will be most effective, so that's why I decided to join this race.
Thank you. This question goes to all candidates. Because we've already discussed the military, we'll make this a short answer question, 30 seconds each. What more should Congress do to help our military veterans? We'll start with Mr. Howze.
Listen, I've spent a lot of time with veterans over the last year talking about their needs, and one of the things I would propose is legislation called the Accountability to Veterans Act. In this valley, we have a high percentage of our population that enlists in the military. I've coached thousands of kids in small towns in the Central Valley, and their only path for a lot of them is go into the military. We should fund high concentration of veteran areas higher than we do very low concentration areas.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
We absolutely need to do a better job of supporting our veterans. You know, we have veteran centers here that offer services, but more needs to be done. More staffing needs to be allocated. We have a VA clinic over in French Camp that they just broke ground on 20 years after it was first authorized by Congress. That's absurd. Our veterans are going to Palo Alto, having to get their own ride or ride a bus. Let's start right here in the valley and fix that and make sure that our veterans get the care that they need.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. Being a veteran myself, I have long been an advocate for improving the care that we provide to our veterans, ensuring that our veterans and their families receive the benefits and the care that our veterans have earned. I've been an advocate for years for the very facility that was just mentioned at French Camp, the community-based outpatient clinic. And it's true, it took 10 years at least of intense lobbying to finally get ground broken. So I was happy to at least have been able to participate in that process and finally see the first step to providing greater services for our veterans. We need to make sure now that that the service actually occurs.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins?
I have a very strong opinion that the best thing we can do for our troops is to bring them home. These costly wars have been going on for nearly 20 years, and our enemies are stronger than they were when we started.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley?
I'm also a veteran. The first thing we should do is not send them out on stupid wars with no objectives. The second we should do is make sure they have the equipment they need to not get blown up in the streets of Baghdad. The third thing we need to do is when they come home, take care of them, supply their needs forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder?
Veterans, look, politicians pay lip service to veterans, but when it comes to actually doing something, oftentimes people are nowhere to be seen. We've seen that with funding for the Veterans Administration. We used to have 20 years ago 11 nurses and doctors at the VA in Modesto. Today we have 4, and the population of veterans has skyrocketed. I talked to a nurse who says that he's getting paid the same amount that his daughter is getting paid as a first-year nurse, even though he has 30 years of work experience. And VA nurses in Stockton are being paid 25% more than Modesto. I sponsored a bill to try to fix that.
Thank you. This next question also goes to all the candidates and is a short answer question. Among presidential candidates, who do you support and why? And we'll start with Ms. Livengood.
I support President Trump, and the reason I support it is because he has done an amazing job for our economy. He has gotten rid of regulations that have harmed us, and he continues to fight for us every day. I don't always agree with him lockstep, but when I look at what he's done for us here in the Valley, you guys, people are working again. I had a husband who's a general contractor, and there were times when we couldn't put food on our table. We work now. That's reason enough.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Of the candidates who are currently running, I support President Trump. There are many who will disagree with his means of delivering the message. Sometimes he's a little bit rough around the edges, but if you look at the results he has achieved on so many fronts, it's outstanding. In the economic front, he's brought inflation down, he's brought the joblessness down. We've got people of all categories who have greater rates of participation in our economy.
Thank you.
He's achieved great results.
Mr. Blevins.
Well, considering that my opening statement had MATH, which stands for Make America Think Harder, I am clearly a supporter of Andrew Yang for president. Hashtag Yang Gang.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley?
All of the current Democratic candidates except for Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you. Frr Harder?
I haven't endorsed, but I can tell you one thing, I won't be voting for Donald Trump. My frustration is that we do not seem to have a single presidential candidate that has figured out that California is more than San Francisco and Los Angeles. We have not had a single one visit this congressional district that's currently running. I put out that to each and every one, no matter who it is, if they want to understand the challenges in the Valley, they have to come here first. And that's why so many of the policies that they put out have not recognized the challenges here. We have not had a single candidate that has said, as far as I can tell, a single sentence about water policy. These people have to be informed before they do anything else.
Thank you. Mr. Howze?
Lowest unemployment in our lifetimes. Lowest black unemployment, Hispanic unemployment, largest wage rises. That's number one. Number two, fundamentally remaking the Supreme Court so that we end legislating through judicial fiat. And lastly, a president who's willing to negotiate. He's tried to work with the other side to solve problems like the Dreamers. I'll be supporting President Trump.
Thank you. This question is for all candidates. We'll start with Mr. Elliott. Please share your views on gun control legislation. Mr. Elliott.
As a member of the military for 30 years and having grown up on a farm, I am very familiar with firearms. Therefore, I absolutely support the Second Amendment. I am a lifetime member of the NRA, so that probably says all you need to hear about that. Now, we can all agree that there are certain criminals, certain people who should not have guns. We need to look at problems of mental health and a criminal background to determine those who should not have those guns, but I certainly support not allowing criminals to have guns. Now, having said that, we should not take that and take it to an extreme to where we encroach on the rights of law-abiding citizens to have their own weapons. I support the Second Amendment.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins.
I support the Second Amendment with universal background checks. There are other countries like Argentina and India which have a similar homicide rate to the United States, but they have a much lower amount of guns. Meanwhile, Switzerland has record low amounts of homicide, but they have a very high amount of gun ownership, meaning that guns are not the problem that we are facing.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
Get your booze out of the way now. Okay. I own a ranch with my brother. In the back country, we have bear, mountain lion, and wild hogs. And the feral hogs are the worst because if they get you cornered, they will eat you. So we have to have guns out on the ranch. But what we're doing is not working. We're killing too many people in this country, and everybody's blaming somebody else who used to be sane yesterday and is insane today, and it's just not working. Guns, the right to keep and bear arms, needs to be changed to a privilege, and that means full repeal of the Second Amendment. Full repeal of the Second Amendment, the same provision in every state constitution, and the underlying right that it supposedly rests on, and replace it with regulations as a privilege.
We can give you a little more time if you need it.
Pardon?
Does that conclude your answer? I was offering to give you a little more time because you were interrupted.
It will take 100 years to get that done, but eventually we're going to get tired of all of our neighbors getting shot.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
I don't think that the best-selling item for back to school should be a bulletproof backpack. And we did a town hall earlier this year. We invited every high school student across the district. We had them rank all of the most important issues to them. Number one was gun violence. Think about that. Think about every high school student across this district who every day that they go to school is afraid of what could happen. That's where we are. And that's why I'm really proud that we voted last year to pass universal background checks. I think it's incredible. I don't understand how anybody supporting the Second Amendment can believe that we shouldn't be able to know who's going to go out and buy a gun. 90% of the American public supports universal background checks. And it's been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk for 9 months. That has cost lives. We have had shootings from folks who have failed background checks, went to a gun show, got a gun through the loophole, and then committed a tragedy. That's important to pass.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
Look, I support the Second Amendment knowing that gun ownership by law-abiding citizens makes us a safer nation. It's a powerful deterrent to crime. And if you don't believe so, just look at Mexico, our neighbor to the south. They have one gun store in the entire country. Citizens are prohibited from owning guns. Yet they have 3 times the homicide rate as the United States by guns. Okay? Making more laws, gun control, is only control of law-abiding citizens. It doesn't affect criminals. If you wanted to make us a safer nation, you'd make it easier for law-abiding citizens to get concealed carry permits at will. Look at the Texas shooting case. Good guy with a gun, stop a bad guy with a gun. One shot, right? Infringing upon our Second Amendment rights is not the way to make us a safer nation.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
So this follows up on a conversation I had with my 6, 9, and 11-year-old the other day. We were driving home and we were talking about school safety. I don't know if you know this, but at schools today, they have drills where they talk about what they're going to do and they practice what they're going to do if an armed gunman or some sort of terrorist comes to the school. And it was terrifying. It made me want to cry that this is the reality where we live in. And you know what? They're right. What we're doing isn't working. And what we've been doing is restricting gun ownership. We have been trampling our civil liberties all in the name of protecting people. But it's not working, guys. It's absolutely not working. We need to look at the reasons why people are doing these horrific crimes. Over in Europe, there's stabbings with knives. We have a humanity problem. We don't have a problem with guns. It is the people, not the guns. And as a mother with 3 kids in public school, I can safely tell you that I will do anything to protect them, and taking away gun ownership rights is not going to protect my children or yours.
Thank you. This question is for all the candidates, and it's from the students at Stanislaus State. What can be done to bring more decent wage jobs to the Valley, particularly those for recent college graduates? And we'll start with Mr. Blevins.
Well, there's one thing we can do is we can invest in our education. I have heard from businesses in Silicon Valley that don't move jobs to the Valley because they think that we don't have the necessary education, because they want to be near these very successful UC colleges. So if we expand our enrollment in these colleges, we will get more jobs to the Valley.
Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
Mr. Howze, on his work with the West Side Industrial Park in Turlock, is the right direction, for which he should be commended. Stanislaus needs to add a full-scale engineering school. Stanford Research Institute should consider installing in that industrial park a satellite institute to help bring such activity out here, and that should be reproduced all up and down the valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
We all agree we need more jobs in the Valley. We send 86,000 people every single day over the Altamont Pass. We all know someone that gets up at 4 in the morning, gets home at 10 o'clock at night. Think about what that does to somebody's family life. Think about what that does to sit in your car every day. We need to be doing two things. First, we need to be expanding the good businesses that are already here. One of the bills that I put forward would make sure that we're creating more partnerships between companies like Gallo Wines and Foster Farms to work directly with community colleges and high schools to train folks in the skills that they need. And then second, we need to change our entire mentality around education. Right now, if you go and get a 4-year philosophy degree, you can get a federal scholarship for that. But if you go and you want to be a maintenance mechanic, you can't. That's outrageous, because maintenance mechanics make 6-figure salaries. We have a lot of openings for those. So I introduced a bill to fix that and to make sure that the same federal scholarships that are available for 4-year college are available for short-term programs as well.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
I think that's one area where we agree. I'm very fortunate to have a great friend who works at the Volt Institute. I think being able to finance people going into trade school educations is important. We've all had that experience when you want somebody to fix the air conditioning on a hot day, and there is a shortage of people that are willing to come out or available to come out and work with you. Listen, I appreciate Mike tapping us for what we did in the Turlock Regional Industrial Park. There is a model by which we could create tens of thousands of jobs in this valley, and that is to restart our redevelopment zones in the state of California. There's a pathway to be able to do federal, state, local redevelopment areas. Where we come into blighted areas, we provide funding for businesses to move in and build there. We do it by putting a lot of infrastructure in first, and we actually increase the value of the property without raising taxes, and then they pay more property taxes as the business start to work. This is what's happening in Turlock. It's a model we could utilize all over the state of California, and I'm a big proponent and will push that at the federal level.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
So I've had experience bringing jobs to the Valley. As a member of the county's Aviation Advisory Committee, when I got on there, we had no air cargo. We had very limited commercial service, and I said, why don't we have air cargo? And I was told by the then airport director that, oh, we can't have air cargo. Well, today, go drive out to the airport in San Joaquin County. We have air cargo that supports Amazon and thousands of jobs here in the Valley. When I represented local governments, we had worked with our federal partners to attract resources here to support our things like iGate. It's over an incubation center over in Livermore. I've worked on looking at EDA departments to bring money into our region and try to advance projects. We have resources out there, but we need a member that's going to look at everything that's available currently and see how does that support the needs that we have. We absolutely have to have more vocational education. Kids should not be coming out of high school not able to fulfill a career.
Thank you. And Mr. Elliott.
I think there are two primary things that we should do. One, we have already started doing up in San Joaquin County, and that is to encourage good businesses to move to the valley. We have many advantages here for our businesses. We have established an economic development program, an economic development incentive program as well, to encourage these good businesses to come. And when you get good businesses, they bring good jobs with them. They bring the opportunities. The second thing is encouraging, the second subpart of that is encouraging businesses who are already here to stay. Now, in order to make the greatest synergy out of all of this, if we bring good businesses, keep the ones we have, what we then are left with is a shortage of workers. That's one complaint we often hear from business leaders, is that they don't have enough workers who are skilled to provide the services that they need. So we need more programs that engage students at the high school level in vocational things, such as apprenticeship programs. Those are already starting in San Joaquin County as well. We need
Thank
to
you very
expand
much,
those.
among Republican and Democratic voters. If elected, how would you stay true to your party's principles while representing all people in your district, including those of other parties? We'll start with Mr. Barkley.
Tough question. Obviously, much of the district disagrees with me on gun control, for instance. At the moment, it'll take them 100 years to change their mind, but they won't be this generation. I don't know how to represent those people, except just to do my best to listen to the other concerns that they have and try to implement those.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
I think it starts with listening to the needs of this community first. I campaigned against a member of Congress that hadn't done a town hall in years. I promised I was going to do things differently, and I have. 18 town halls in 1 year, going across the entire breadth of the district, listening to anybody that wants to show up. Earlier today, I did one-on-one meetings. We posted them publicly. Anybody was welcome. I think some folks in this audience came and told me whatever's on their mind. That's how we have to govern. And if you look at the policies that we've actually supported, I'm happy to work with Trump, to work with anybody that has a good idea that'll actually help support the Valley. Look, for instance, what we've done on homelessness, where I think, unfortunately, there's been a lot of folks who are putting their partisan interests ahead of what's good for California, what's good for our neighborhoods. And so what we're seeing is, instead of solution causing, we're seeing finger pointing. And that's why we took an effort to create that federal emergency. That effort is going to get support from the administration and the Trump administration, as well as support from Democrats across the country that want to do something to solve that problem in front of us.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
Listen, I've held elected office and I have a track record. When I was a Turlock City Council member, I put customer service for any member of our community above everything else. And in fact, I know for a fact, the Bee just absolutely eviscerated me in an editorial one time because I was tapped by our Democrat mayor to go negotiate the best tax deal for Turlock and a road tax. I don't favor new taxes, but I went and fought like a dog because it was what was asked for our city. And that's the way I'll serve all constituents. I will listen, I will provide customer service, and it will be the priority of our district field office that we make sure anybody coming in asking for help gets help before they leave.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
So how do you stay true to the party? Well, that's the first problem. We need to stay true to the people of the 10th Congressional District. We need to stop being beholden to party bosses telling us to vote this way, vote that way, and what to do. That's the whole reason we're in this mess. That's the whole reason that our priorities aren't being accomplished by Congress, because party bosses decided that impeachment was what they needed to do. And we need to put us first. I worked on the Hill. Back in 1999, I went to DC, and I worked for a Republican member who was next to a Democrat member, and our offices got together every week, and we said, what can we do for the Valley? How are we going to accomplish it? And that's what we did. We delivered in the Farm Bill. We delivered in the Transportation Reauthorization Bill. There was ACE, was a T21 success story. Look at ACE today. You guys, we need to stop the partisan bickering, and we need to get back to the basics. And I will promise you, I will put you first, not party bosses, not impeachment, not all this nonsense.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. The key to the whole question is staying true to your own principles. When you get elected, the people know what your principles are, or at least they should, and that's what they send you to Washington, D.C. to do, to represent them and stay true to your principles. That's why it's so important to find a politician that you can agree with in terms of the majority of his policy objectives. Now, from my point of view, from day one in office as a county supervisor, I have kept a quote on my desk from John Quincy Adams. And it says, always vote for principle, though you may vote alone. So I have kept that in mind and taken that to heart. And there have been times I have voted alone on an issue that I was the only one who took exception to what was going on there. But you have to listen to the people of the Valley. You need to address the issues that are at stake, and then take action in accordance with what will be the best solution.
Thank you. Mr. Blevins.
Republicans, independents, and Democrats all have a lot in common. We don't like corrupt politicians that don't listen to us. We are all facing similar issues, and I will listen to anyone regardless of their party preference. I am leading a tripartisan movement called the UBI Caucus that will benefit all of us.
Thank you. Candidates, we're running just a bit over, but everybody wants to hear your closing statements. So let's have those. We'll go in reverse order from opening statements. That means we'll start with Mr. Bob Elliott and work from the audience's perspective to the left. Mr. Elliott.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a candidate for Congress, I am proud to have earned the endorsement of many community leaders throughout the district, as well as more than 40 past and present elected officials. Now, these are mayors, council members, county supervisors, a state assemblyman. I have been overwhelmingly endorsed by those leaders who have to get things done and know what it takes to do that. We are truly blessed to live in this wonderful country of ours, where our Constitution guarantees us rights and freedoms. Our freedom is what makes the United States of America a truly unique and exceptional country. Our freedom is what makes America a land worth fighting for. I'm a candidate who has not just talked about the greatness of freedom, but has actually spent a lifetime serving that cause and defending it. I am the only candidate in this race who has actually led military and civilian personnel. I am the candidate with the background and experience to get the job done. I am your choice for common sense and responsibility in government. Tonight, I ask for your support to win this seat for our valley.
Thank you. Ms. Livengood.
Families are struggling here in the 10th Congressional District, and so is our ag industry that supports many of the families. You know, I never thought I was going to get involved in policy, but I did. I was set out on a path where I went to DC. I worked for a member of Congress where one day I got a phone call as a staff assistant, the person that answers the phone. And it was about a bill where the person who had previously staffed it left the office. I got the go-ahead to take that bill, and as a staff assistant, got the bill signed into law for the federal wildland firefighters. There was a pay equity issue on our public lands, and I worked tooth and nail to work with my Democratic colleagues, their staff, and with over in the Senate, the colleagues over there to get that bill signed into law. Well, I was still the girl answering the phones. And that's where I learned that we really have the ability, once you learn how to work and how to work with others to get things done, you can accomplish anything. And accomplishments aren't happening now, and our families are struggling. And that's why I'm up here. We need help, and I have the skills to help the 10th Congressional District, and I'd be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Mr. Howze.
First of all, thank you for everybody who came out tonight. This is how democracy works, when you're willing to come and listen to candidates. Again, my top 3 priorities as your next member of Congress will be, number 1, making quality health care affordable for all Americans. 2nd, reducing the cost of living for Valley families. And 3rd, securing America's borders. I'm honored to be endorsed by, just a short list here, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, Back the Badge California, Manteca police officers, and 10 mayors currently in office in the 10th Congressional District. The people that have the greatest ability to improve our daily quality of life have said they trust Ted Howze to be the best representative for our valley in Washington, D.C. You can too. I would appreciate your vote on Tuesday, March 3rd.
Thank you. Mr. Harder.
There's a lot of noise coming out of Washington. Every day I wake up frustrated by the corruption and the polarization embedded in our political system. We've seen some of that polarization here tonight. But let me tell you what I'm working on. I've focused not on what's going on in DC, but what we need to do in the Valley. That's why I've done 18 town halls, more than any Central Valley representative in history, just in my first year. And that's why I'm working with anybody, Republican or Democrat, to get to work. I've been an independent voice in the Valley, sponsoring more bills with Republican members of Congress than any other Democrat in the country. And if you look at what we've actually been able to accomplish, That's why. It's because we're working with every side, trying to make sure that we're coming to common sense agreements. Things like making sure that our veterans' care is taken care of and Vietnam vets affected by Agent Orange have medical benefits. Making sure that we are lowering the cost of health care and addressing the cost of prescription drugs, and securing the first federal funding for a water storage project in the Valley in over 50 years. That's a big deal. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you, and I look forward to all your work in Representative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Barkley.
Here are top priorities from my platform page on my website, which is on these cards out in the lobby. 1, bring the jobs back from overseas and strengthen the unions to do that, making my platform the strongest pro-union platform in the country. 2, in 1861-62, we had a biblical flood on the West Coast, which produced a lake in the Central Valley 300 miles long, up to 60 miles wide, and killed thousands of people, and that was the least of 7 such floods over the past 1,800 years. On my website, I submit a specific federal plan taken from 100 years of federal and state reports to add 44 million acre-feet of more storage and 3 new conveyances and no tunnels, which will reduce that flood risk and solve the water problems of the farmers, the cities, the fish in the Delta, and reduce the Colorado River overdraft. And we need to triple the width of the new Maloney spillway so the dam is not overtopped by the next such flood. 3, on my website, I present a balanced federal budget, funds Medicare for all, and that water plan, and all the infrastructure we need and still produce a surplus. 4, we should adopt a Bernie Sanders, a welcoming and safe America for all, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barkley. Mr. Blevins.
When you cast your vote in March, think about how you want to spend your tax dollars. My opponents are great people, but they will spend your hard-earned money in Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. I think our money will be better spent in our neighborhoods, in our district, and in our country in the form of universal basic income, healthcare, and education.
Thank you.
That concludes tonight's debate. We want to thank all of you for attending, our moderators, Patty Guerra and Garth Stapley, our timekeepers, Maria Figueroa and Keira Wilkinson, our video and social team, Jim Silva and Andy Alfaro, our McClatchy support, Connie Heiberg, the State Theater and its staff, and finally, and most important, we want to thank our candidates who show great courage in coming forward to serve in hopes of making our communities better and stronger. Please give them all a round of applause. Thanks for attending. Get home safely.
So Sergeant Pepper